Part 1. The Pact Admiral Tay stood at the observation window of the diplomatic vessel. His hands were behind his back. His uniform was clean and pressed. Outside, the stars moved slowly as the ship traveled through deep space. He had seen many battles in his life. He had lost friends. He had won wars. But today was different. Today, there would be no fighting. Ambassador Yuna walked up beside him. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a calm voice. She had spent 20 years talking to alien races. She knew how to smile when she was angry. She knew how to stay quiet when she wanted to scream. These skills had kept humanity alive many times. Are you ready? She asked. Tay did not look at her. I have been a soldier for 40 years. I do not know how to be ready for peace. Yuna nodded. She understood. For humans, war had become a way of life. When they first left Earth and reached the stars, they found that the galaxy was not empty. It was full of other races. Some were kind. Most were not. The Velen Empire was the largest and most powerful. They controlled 1,000 star systems. Their ships were fast. Their weapons were strong. And they did not like humans. The war between humans and the Velen had lasted for 15 years. Millions had died on both sides. Cities had burned. Planets had been destroyed. But somehow, humanity had survived. They had fought with everything they had. They had built ships faster than anyone thought possible. They had created weapons that scared even the Velen commanders. And now, after all that blood and pain, the Velen wanted to talk. The diplomatic vessel slowed down. Through the window, Tay could see the Velen station. It was massive. It floated in space like a metal mountain. Hundreds of Velen ships surrounded it. Their designs were elegant but deadly. Tay had fought against ships like those. He had watched them destroy human vessels. He had seen good soldiers die because of those weapons. They want peace, Yuna said, reading his thoughts. The war hurt them too. Or they want us to lower our guard, Tay replied. Yuna was quiet for a moment. Perhaps, but we cannot fight forever. Our people are tired. Our resources are running low. If this treaty gives us time to recover, then it is worth the risk. Tay knew she was right. He did not like it, but he knew it. The human colonies were struggling. Factories worked day and night to build weapons. Children grew up without parents. Families lived in fear of the next attack. Peace, even a fragile one, would give them a chance to breathe. The ship docked with the Velen station. Tay and Yuna walked through the corridors with their guards. The Velen were tall and thin. Their skin was pale blue. Their eyes were large and dark. They moved with a grace that made humans look clumsy. But Tay had learned long ago not to be fooled by appearances. These creatures were killers. They had conquered hundreds of worlds. They had enslaved entire species. Humans were just the latest challenge. The meeting room was large and round. In the center was a table made of black stone. Velen leaders sat on one side. Human diplomats sat on the other. At the head of the Velen group was High Commander Cal. He was old for a Velen. His face had lines that showed his age. But his eyes were still sharp. Still dangerous. Welcome, Cal said. His voice was smooth like water. We are pleased that humanity has agreed to this meeting. Yuna bowed her head slightly. We are here to listen. Cal smiled. At least, Tay thought it was a smile. With Velen, it was hard to tell. The war has been costly for both our peoples. We have lost ships. We have lost soldiers. We have lost time that could have been spent building a better future. We believe it is time to end this conflict. Tay watched the Velen carefully. He had learned to read their body language over the years. Something felt wrong. The Velen were too calm, too friendly. They had been enemies for 15 years. Now they wanted to be friends? It did not make sense, but Yuna was already speaking. She talked about trade agreements, about shared borders, about the exchange of technology. The Velen nodded and agreed to everything. They offered even more than the humans had asked for. It was almost too good to be true. After hours of talking, the treaty was ready. It was written in both human and Velen languages. The terms were simple. Humanity would reduce its military forces. They would destroy most of their warships. They would stop building new weapons. In return, the Velen would protect human space. They would share their technology. They would welcome humans into the Galactic Council. Tay read the treaty 3 times. Each time, his stomach felt heavier. "We are giving up our weapons," he said quietly to Yuna. "All of them?" "Not all," she whispered back. "Just the ones they know about." Tay looked at her. For the first time that day, he felt a small spark of hope. He had always known that Yuna was smart. Now he realized she was also careful. Very careful. The signing ceremony was formal. Cameras from 100 worlds recorded the moment. High Commander Kel pressed his hand to the treaty. Ambassador Yuna did the same. The document glowed briefly as it was sealed. The war was officially over. That night, humanity celebrated. On Earth, people danced in the streets. On the colonies, families hugged each other and cried with relief. After 15 years of fear and death, they finally had peace. They finally had hope, but Admiral Tay did not celebrate. He stood alone on the observation deck of the diplomatic vessel. He watched the Velen station grow smaller as they traveled away. Something in his heart told him that this was not the end. It was only the beginning. "You do not trust them," a voice said behind him. Tay turned. It was General Hana. She was young but experienced. She had commanded the defense of 3 colonies during the war. She had never lost a battle. "No," Tay said. "I do not." Hana walked up beside him. "Neither do I, but the people need this. They need to believe that peace is possible. And when peace fails..." Hana was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was hard like steel. "Then we will be ready. We will always be ready." Far below the surface of Earth, in tunnels that no map showed, engineers worked in secret. They did not celebrate the treaty. They did not rest. They built. They prepared. They waited. Because humanity had learned one truth in their short time among the stars. Trust was a gift, but survival was a choice. And humanity always chose to survive. The Pact had been signed. The galaxy watched. And somewhere in the darkness of space, the Velen smiled their cold smiles and counted the days until the humans forgot how to fight. They did not know that humans never forget. Part 2. The betrayal. 30 years passed like a quiet dream. The children who were born during the war grew up and had children of their own. The colonies expanded. New cities rose on distant worlds. Factories that once built weapons now built homes and hospitals. Humanity was healing. Humanity was growing. Commander Jin was one of those children of peace. He was born 3 months after the treaty was signed. He never knew the sound of bombs. He never saw the flash of enemy fire. His father had been a soldier who died before Jin was born. His mother raised him alone, always telling him stories about the old days, about the war, about the price of freedom. Now, Jin was 30 years old. He served on Orbital Station 7, a small defense platform that circled Earth. It was not an exciting job. The station was old. Most of its weapons had been removed after the treaty. Only a few patrol ships remained. Jin spent his days checking systems, running drills, and watching the stars. He often wondered what his father would think of this peaceful galaxy. Would he be proud? Would he be relieved? Or would he feel the same strange emptiness that Jin sometimes felt? A feeling that something was missing, that the quiet was too quiet. On that morning, Jin was drinking tea in the command center. The screens around him showed the normal patterns of space traffic. Cargo ships moving between colonies. Passenger vessels traveling to distant worlds. A few Velen ships passing through human space, as allowed by the treaty. Everything was normal. Then the alarm started. Jin nearly dropped his cup. Red lights flashed across every screen. Warning sounds filled the room. Other officers ran to their stations, their faces pale with confusion. This was not a drill. Jin had run 1,000 drills. This was different. What is happening? Jin shouted. Lieutenant Myra, a young woman with short hair, pulled up the sensor data. Her hands were shaking. Commander. Velen fleet. Hundreds of ships. They just appeared at the edge of the system. Jin felt his blood turn cold. That is impossible. The treaty. They are not responding to communications, Myra said. Her voice cracked. They are heading straight for Earth. Jin stood frozen. He had trained for emergencies. He had studied military history. But nothing had prepared him for this moment. The Velen were allies. They had shared technology with humanity. They had protected human borders. For 30 years, they had been friends. He looked at the screens. The Velen fleet was massive. Hundreds of warships moved in perfect formation. Their weapons were powered. Their shields were up. They were not here to talk. They were here to destroy. Contact Earth Command, Jin ordered. Tell them. The station shook violently. Jin was thrown to the floor. Sparks flew from damaged consoles. The lights flickered and died, replaced by dim emergency lighting. Through the observation window, Jin could see the first orbital stations burning. Fire blossomed in the darkness of space. They had not even asked for surrender. They had not given any warning. They had simply attacked. Jin pulled himself up. His ears were ringing. Blood ran down his forehead from a cut he did not remember getting. Around him, his crew was struggling to recover. Some were injured. Some were not moving at all. Damage report, Jin said. His voice sounded strange to his own ears. Mira was at her console, tears streaming down her face. We lost the main reactor. Life support is failing. We have maybe 2 hours of air. Jin looked at the tactical display. It was barely working, but he could see enough. The Valen were not just attacking the orbital stations. They were attacking everything. Defense platforms, communication satellites, transport ships full of civilians. Nothing was spared. The treaty, Jin whispered. They broke the treaty. He thought about all the weapons humanity had destroyed, all the warships they had taken apart, all the soldiers they had sent home. For 30 years, they had believed in peace. They had trusted the villain. They had lowered their guard, and now they were paying the price. Jin grabbed the communication console. This is Commander Jin of Orbital Station 7. To any human vessel that can hear me, we are under attack. I repeat, we are under attack. The Velen have broken the treaty. They are. The console exploded. Jin was thrown backward, hitting the wall hard. When he opened his eyes, he could barely see through the smoke. Mira was beside him, trying to stop the bleeding from his arm. We have to evacuate, she said. Jin shook his head. The escape pods. Are they working? Some of them. Get the crew out. Everyone who can move. What about you? Jin looked at the remains of his command center. Half of his people were dead. The station was falling apart. But through the broken window, he could still see Earth. Blue and green and beautiful. His home. The home of 8 billion people who were about to learn that peace was a lie. I need to keep broadcasting, Jin said. Someone has to warn them. Someone has to tell them what happened here. Myra wanted to argue, but she knew there was no time. She gathered the surviving crew and led them toward the escape pods. Jin stayed at his station. He found a backup communication unit and started broadcasting again. This is a message to all human colonies. The Velen Empire has attacked Earth without warning. They have destroyed our orbital defenses. They are bombing our cities. This is not a drill. This is not a mistake. We are at war again. Do not trust the Velen. Do not surrender. Fight, run, hide. Do whatever you must to survive. Remember us. Remember what they did here today. And when the time comes, make them pay for every life they have taken. Jin repeated the message again and again. He broadcast it on every frequency he could find. He did not know if anyone was listening. He did not know if anyone would survive to hear it. But he kept talking. He kept warning. Through the broken window, he watched Earth burn. Cities that had stood for centuries were now craters. Billions of people were dying. Children, families, dreams, all of it turning to ash. Jin thought about his mother. She lived in a small town near the coast. She probably did not even know what was happening yet. She was probably sitting in her garden, thinking about what to cook for dinner. In a few minutes, she would be gone. Everything she was, everything she remembered, would be erased. Jin did not cry. There would be time for tears later. If there was a later, he kept broadcasting until the station finally gave out. The last thing he saw was the blue curve of Earth, wrapped in fire and smoke. The last thing he thought was a promise to his father, a promise to everyone who had died. This was not the end. This was the beginning. Somewhere below the burning surface, deep in tunnels that no Velen knew about, the survivors were gathering. General Hana, now old and gray, but still fierce, watched the reports come in. She had always known this day would come. She had spent 30 years preparing for it. How many did we lose? She asked her aide. A young man named Wu looked at the numbers. His face was pale. Surface cities are gone. Orbital stations are destroyed. But the underground bunkers are holding. We saved about 2 billion people. 2 billion out of 8. Hannah closed her eyes. The weight of 6 billion souls pressed down on her heart. And the project? She asked. Wu nodded slowly. Project Rebirth is intact. The Velen do not know it exists. Hannah opened her eyes. They were cold now. Cold and hard like the mountains above them. Good. Send word to all surviving commanders. We wait, we rebuild. And when we are ready, she did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. The galaxy had watched humanity burn. Now they would watch humanity rise. And this time, there would be no treaty. No mercy, only justice. Part 3. The Silence. The Galactic Council met on a space station at the center of known space. It was a beautiful place. Crystal towers rose from platforms that floated in an artificial sky. Gardens bloomed with flowers from 1,000 worlds. Representatives from 40 different species walked through halls made of light and glass. For centuries, the Council had been the voice of peace in the galaxy. They made laws. They settled disputes. They decided which species was allowed to grow and which was kept small. They called themselves protectors, guardians, keepers of order. When the distress signals from Earth began, every member of the Council heard them. They watched the footage from human satellites. They saw the Velen ships descending like metal rain. They saw cities turn to fire. They heard the screams of billions of voices calling for help, and they did nothing. Ambassador Knox of the Koran people sat in his chair and watched the destruction unfold on the viewing screens. His species had always been careful. They had survived by never taking sides, by never getting involved. "This is a matter between the Velen and the humans," he said. "We should not interfere." Commander Bell of the Rin, a species of tall beings with feathered wings, shook her head. "The humans signed a treaty. They gave up their weapons because we promised to protect them." "We promised." "We made no such promise," Nox replied. "The Velen made the promise. If they broke it, that is their responsibility, not ours." "You know that is not true," Bell said. Her voice was rising. "We guaranteed the treaty. We told the humans they would be safe. We encouraged them to disarm. We said the Velen could be trusted. And now 6 billion of them are dead." Nox was quiet. Around the chamber, other representatives shifted uncomfortably. They knew Bell was right. They all knew. But knowing and acting were different things. The Velen Empire was powerful. Anyone who opposed them would become their next target. High Commander Kell of the Velen watched the debate with cold amusement. He had grown even older in the past 30 years. His skin was wrinkled like old paper, but his eyes still held that dangerous light. "The humans were a threat," he said simply. "They grew too fast. They built too many ships. They were young and aggressive. The galaxy is better without them." "You murdered billions of innocent people," Bell said. "I removed a problem," Kell replied. "In 100 years, humanity would have challenged everyone in this room. You all know it. You all feared it. I simply did what none of you had the courage to do." The chamber was silent. No one argued. No one defended humanity. Because deep down, many of them had felt the same fear. Humans were strange. They adapted too quickly. They fought too fiercely. They never accepted limits. Other species had taken millions of years to reach the stars. Humans had done it in a few hundred. Some had called them a miracle. Others had called them a plague. Now, it seemed, the debate was over. Far away on Earth. In a bunker 3 miles below the surface, General Hanna gathered the survivors around a table made of rough stone. The air was cold and smelled of metal and dust. Emergency lights cast long shadows on tired faces. 2 billion people had survived. They were scattered across bunkers and caves and hidden places that the Velen bombs had not reached. Some were soldiers. Most were not. There were teachers and farmers, doctors and children. All of them were scared. All of them were angry. All of them wanted to know what would happen next. Hannah looked at the faces around her. She saw Engineer Wu, who had spent 30 years hiding weapons under mountains. She saw Scientist Su, who had designed shields and reactors in secret laboratories. She saw young officers like Myra, who had escaped the orbital stations. And she saw old soldiers who remembered the first war, the war before the treaty, the war they had thought was over. "The Galactic Council has responded to our distress signals," Hannah said. Her voice was steady, but her hands were tight fists at her sides. "What did they say?" Wu asked. Hannah was quiet for a moment. The answer burned in her throat like acid. "Nothing." They said nothing. They voted to recognize the Velen action as an internal security matter. They will not help us. They will not even admit that a crime has happened. The room erupted in angry voices. People shouted and cried and cursed the alien council. Some slammed their fists against the walls. Others simply stood with their heads down, too tired for rage. Hannah let them vent their anger. She understood it. She felt it too. 40 years ago, she had trusted the galaxy. She had believed that peace was possible. She had watched Una sign that treaty and had hoped, truly hoped, that humanity's wars were over. Now Una was dead. She had been on Earth's surface when the bombs fell. So had Admiral Tay and thousands of other leaders who believed in the treaty. The Velen had killed them first. Cut off the head, they thought, and the body would die. But humanity was not like other species. They had no single head. Every human was a leader. Every human could fight. Every human remembered. What do we do now? Myra asked. Her eyes were red from crying, but her voice was steady. Hannah looked at Wu. The old engineer nodded slowly. He pulled out a datapad and placed it on the table. On the screen was a map of Earth's underground network. Lines stretched across continents, connecting bunkers and tunnels that had been built in secret. For 30 years we prepared, Wu said. We followed the treaty on the surface. We destroyed the ships they knew about. We dismantled the weapons they could see. But underground, we built. We designed. We waited. Sue stepped forward. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She had worked in secret her entire career. No one outside this room knew what she had created. Project Rebirth, she said. 12,000 warships, hidden in caverns across 4 continents. New designs. Faster, stronger, deadlier than anything we built before. The Velen think they destroyed our fleet. They destroyed our old fleet. The new one has never flown. The room went quiet. 12,000 ships. It was more than humanity had ever built. More than the Velen knew existed. How? Myra asked. How did you hide all of this? Hannah almost smiled. Almost. We are human. We learn from our mistakes. The First War taught us that the galaxy cannot be trusted. The treaty taught us that promises can be broken. So we made our own promise. A secret promise. That no matter what happened, humanity would never be helpless again. She looked around the room. The Galactic Council has abandoned us. The Velen think we are finished. They are celebrating their victory. They believe they have removed the threat. Hannah's voice grew cold. They are wrong. They have not removed anything. They have awakened something. Something they should have feared more than our ships, more than our weapons. They have awakened our anger. She stood tall, and despite her age, she looked like a warrior from the old stories. We will not attack yet. We are not ready. But we will prepare. We will train. We will build more ships, more weapons, more soldiers. And when we are strong enough, we will leave these caves and fly into the stars once more. And then, Wu asked. Hannah's eyes were hard. Then we will remind the galaxy why they feared us in the first place. In the darkness of space, the Velen fleet returned home to celebrations. High Commander Kell received medals and honors. The Galactic Council sent messages of support. Everyone agreed that the human problem had been solved. But on Earth, in the deep places where no alien eyes could see, humanity was changing. The people who emerged from those caves would not be the same as the ones who went in. They would be harder, colder, more dangerous. The galaxy had chosen silence when humanity called for help. Now humanity would repay. That silence was something far worse. Patience, planning, and a rage that would burn across the stars. Part 4. The awakening. 10 years had passed since the burning. 10 years since the Velen had turned Earth's surface to ash and glass. 10 years of hiding. 10 years of building. 10 years of waiting. Engineer Wu stood in the largest cavern humanity had ever made. It stretched for miles under the mountains of what had once been called the Pacific region. The ceiling was so high that it disappeared into darkness. And filling every inch of that darkness were ships. They hung from massive clamps, row after row, level. Warships the size of cities. Fighters small enough to fly through asteroid fields. Carriers that could hold thousands of smaller vessels. All of them silent. All of them waiting. All of them ready. Wu was old now. His hair had turned completely white. His hand shook sometimes when he held his tools. But his mind was still sharp, and his heart was still burning with the same fire that had kept him going all these years. Beautiful, are they not? Scientist Sue said, walking up beside him. She was even older than Wu, but she moved with the energy of someone much younger. Creating Project Rebirth had been her life's work. Every ship, every weapon, every system bore her mark. "They are death," Wu said quietly. "The most perfect death humanity has ever built." Sue nodded. "Yes, that is what they are. And today, they wake up." Today was the day. General Hanna had given the order that morning. After 10 years of preparation, humanity was ready. The ships were complete. The crews were trained. The weapons were tested. There was nothing left to do but launch. Wu walked across the cavern floor to the main control center. It was a simple room filled with screens and consoles. Nothing fancy. Nothing wasteful. Humanity had learned to make every resource count. Every piece of metal mattered. Every drop of fuel was precious. Mira was waiting at the main console. She was not young anymore either. The girl who had escaped Orbital Station 7 was now a veteran commander. Her hair was streaked with gray, and lines marked her face. But her eyes were the same, still fierce, still burning with memories of that day when the sky had fallen. "All ships are reporting ready," Myra said. "Reactors are online. Weapons are charged. Navigation systems are synchronized." Wu nodded and took his place at the console. Sue stood beside him. Around them, dozens of technicians worked at their stations. This was the moment they had been waiting for. The moment when shadows became steel. When dreams became reality. General Hanna's voice came through the speakers. She was on the command ship already, along with the new fleet leadership. "Begin the awakening sequence." Wu's fingers moved across the console. One by one, the ships came to life. Lights flickered on. Engines hummed with power. Systems ran through their checks. The air in the cavern began to vibrate with energy. On the screens, Wu watched as 12,000 ships powered up. Each one was a miracle of human engineering. Sue had designed them to be faster than Velen ships, stronger than Council warships, and more maneuverable than anything else in the galaxy. They used new materials found deep in Earth's crust. They ran on power systems that no alien species had ever imagined. They were not just ships. They were weapons of revenge. "Shields online," a technician reported. "Weapons ready. Life support stable." Sue was watching a different screen. She was monitoring the fleet's main weapon system. It was called the Silence Protocol, a name that Hanna had chosen herself, because silence was what the galaxy had given humanity, and silence was what humanity would give in return. The Silence Protocol was not just one weapon. It was a network. Every ship in the fleet was connected. When they attacked together, their weapons synchronized perfectly. They could focus all their firepower on a single point or spread it across entire fleets. They could adapt to enemy defenses in seconds. They could learn from every battle and become stronger. No species in the galaxy had ever built anything like it, because no species had ever been hurt the way humanity had been hurt. Pain was a teacher, and humanity had learned its lessons well. "Awakening complete," Myra announced. "All ships are operational. We are ready to launch." Wu leaned back in his chair. He thought about all the years he had spent in these caves, all the friends he had lost, all the sacrifices that had been made. He thought about the 6 billion people who had died in the burning. Their faces haunted his dreams every night. Their voices whispered in his ears. Soon, they would have their justice. The ceiling of the cavern began to open. Massive doors, disguised as mountains, split apart to reveal the night sky. Stars shone down into the darkness. For the first time in 10 years, the ship saw the sky that had been taken from them. Hanna's voice returned to the speakers. "Today we rise. Today we remember. Today we begin the work that must be done." The Velen think they destroyed us. The galaxy thinks we are gone. But we are still here. And we have not forgotten. One by one, the ships began to lift off. They rose through the opening in the mountain, disappearing into the night. From the ground, it would look like stars being born. Points of light rising from the earth and flying toward the heavens. Wu watched them go. Tears ran down his old face, but he did not wipe them away. "Go," he whispered. "Go and make them remember." Su put a hand on his shoulder. "We built them well, old friend. They will not fail." On the surface, similar scenes were happening all across the planet. Mountains opened to reveal hidden bases. Lakes drained to uncover underground factories. Cities that had been ruins for 10 years suddenly came alive with lights and movement. Humanity was no longer hiding. Humanity was launching. Fleet Admiral Day stood on the bridge of the flagship. He was a quiet man who rarely spoke unless necessary. He had been chosen to lead, not because he was the loudest voice, but because he was the smartest. He had spent 30 years studying Velen tactics. He knew their strengths. He knew their weaknesses. And he had planned for everything. Fleet status? He asked. "All ships are in formation," his aide reported. "We are ready to leave the system." They looked at the view screen. Earth hung behind them, a wounded world slowly healing. The surface was still scarred from the burning. But green was starting to return. Life was starting to grow again. Humanity had survived. And now they would do more than survive. "Set course for the Velen border," they ordered. "Maximum speed." "Sir," his aide said carefully, "the Velen will detect us long before we arrive. They will have time to prepare." They almost smiled. Almost. "Good. Let them prepare. Let them see us coming. Let them count our ships and realize what they have done. Let fear do our work for us." He turned to face his bridge crew. "For 10 years, we have been silent. For 10 years, they have believed we were dead. Today, we speak again. And our voice will be the last thing they ever hear." The fleet entered hyperspace. 12,000 ships disappeared from Earth's orbit in a flash of light. They moved faster than anything the galaxy had ever seen. They moved like a storm, like a wave, like the anger of a species that had nothing left to lose. Behind them, Earth turned slowly in the darkness. The survivors looked up at the empty sky and waited. They knew what was coming. They had paid the price for peace. Now it was time to collect the debt. The Velen Empire was still celebrating. They had spent 10 years expanding into former human territory. They had built monuments to their victory. They had told stories about how they had saved the galaxy from the human threat. They had no idea that the threat was coming home. Part 5. The Wrath of Velen homeworld was called Prime. It was the oldest world in their empire, the birthplace of their entire species. Great cities covered its surface like jewels on a crown. Towers of crystal and metal reached toward the sky. Parks and gardens spread between buildings, filled with plants from 1,000 conquered worlds. It was beautiful. It was proud. And it had never known war. High Commander Kel sat in his palace at the center of the capital city. He was very old now. His skin had turned pale gray, and his movements were slow. But he still held power. He still ruled the empire. And he still believed that destroying humanity had been his greatest achievement. He was reading reports when the alarm started. At first, he thought it was a mistake. Prime had the strongest defenses in the galaxy. 100 warships guarded its orbit. Shield generators protected every major city. Early warning systems watched every direction for light years. Nothing could approach without being detected hours in advance. But the alarms kept screaming. Kel walked to his command center. Officers were rushing around in panic. Screens showed images that made no sense. Ships, thousands of ships, appearing from hyperspace like ghosts. moving faster than any vessel the Velen had ever seen. "That is impossible," Kel whispered. "The humans are dead. We destroyed them." His admiral, a young officer named Voss, turned to him with fear in his eyes. "The ships are transmitting a message, High Commander." One word, repeated on all frequencies. "What word?" Voss swallowed hard. "Remember." Fleet Admiral Day sat on the bridge of his flagship and watched the Velen homeworld grow larger on the view screen. It was a beautiful planet. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds drifting across the sky. It looked almost like Earth had looked before the burning dot, almost. "Enemy fleet is moving to intercept," Myra reported. She was on the bridge with him, commanding the tactical systems. 100 ships. They are forming a defensive line. Day nodded slowly. "Activate the silence protocol." The human fleet moved as one. 12,000 ships synchronized their movements perfectly. They spread out, surrounding the Velen defenders. Then, on Day's signal, they fired. The light was blinding. Weapons that Sue had designed, weapons that no alien had ever seen, struck the Velen fleet from every direction. The Velen shields held for almost 3 seconds. Then they broke. Ships that had taken years to build were destroyed in moments. The defensive line crumbled like paper in fire. On Prime's surface, people looked up at the sky and saw stars falling. But the stars were not falling toward them. The stars were fighting. And the stars were losing. High Commander Kel watched his fleet die. His face was pale. His hands were shaking. He had not felt fear in decades. He had forgotten what it was like to be powerless. Now he was remembering. "Send a message to the Galactic Council," he ordered. "Tell them we need help. Tell them the humans are attacking." Attacking? "Tell them. The Council has already responded," Voss said quietly. "They say this is an internal matter. They will not intervene." Kel closed his eyes. The same words. The same response he had given when Earth was burning. The Council was using his own logic against him. They were watching the Velen die the same way. They had watched humanity die. The silence that the galaxy had given was now the silence they received. Admiral. They did not celebrate as the Velen fleet was destroyed. He did not smile or cheer. He simply watched and waited. When the last enemy ship was gone, he gave the next order. "Move to planetary bombardment positions." The human fleet descended toward Prime. They passed through the upper atmosphere, close enough that people on the ground could see them. 12,000 ships blocking out the sun. A shadow that covered entire continents. Day opened a communication channel. His voice was broadcast to every screen, every speaker, every device on the planet below. "This is Fleet Admiral Day of the Human Commonwealth. 40 years ago, you signed a treaty with us. We believed in that treaty. We destroyed our weapons. We welcome peace. And in return, you murdered 6 billion of our people. You burned our world. You killed our children." He paused. The entire planet was silent. Millions of Velens stood frozen, listening to words they had never expected to hear. "Your council asked the galaxy for help. The galaxy refused, just as they refused when we asked for help. Just as you refused to show mercy when you attacked Earth. You taught us this lesson. You taught us that the galaxy does not care about justice, that only power matters. We learned. We learned well." Day looked at the planet below. Beautiful cities. Innocent people. Families who had never held a weapon. Children who had never known war. Just like Earth. Just like his own family who had died in the burning. "But we are not like you." His officers looked at him in surprise. The weapons were ready. The fleet was in position. One order, and Prime would burn like Earth had burned. Day stood up from his chair. "We did not come here to become monsters. We came here to deliver a message. A message that every species in the galaxy will understand. He pointed at the view screen. Your military is destroyed. Your empire is broken. But your people will live. Your children will grow up. Your world will survive. Because we choose mercy. We choose to be better than what you made us. He turned to face the camera directly. But remember this moment. Remember what we could have done. Remember that we held your world in our hands and chose not to crush it. And know that if you ever threaten humanity again, we will not choose mercy a second time. The human fleet powered up their engines. One by one, the ships rose away from Prime, leaving the planet intact. The Valen watched them go, unable to believe what had happened. They had been defeated. They had been spared. They had been shown something they had never shown to anyone else. Compassion. On the bridge. Mira walked up to Day. Her eyes were wet with tears. Admiral, are you sure about this? After everything they did, Day looked at her. They took our world. They killed our families. They wanted us to become animals, driven only by hate. If we had destroyed Prime, they would have won. They would have turned us into what they always believed we were. He looked back at the planet fading in the distance. This way, we prove them wrong. This way, we show the galaxy what humanity truly is. Not destroyers, not monsters, but a people who could have burned everything and chose not to. Word of what happened at Prime spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Species that had watched humanity die now watched them rise. They saw the power of the human fleet. They saw the mercy that the humans had shown. And they understood. Humanity was not asking for a place in the galaxy anymore. They were not begging for acceptance. They were simply there. Powerful beyond measure. Merciful beyond expectation. And absolutely, completely impossible to ignore. The Galactic Council held an emergency meeting. They talked for days about what to do. In the end, they did the only thing they could do. They invited humanity to join. Ambassador Mira represented the human commonwealth at the council. She stood in the same chamber where, decades ago, the galaxy had voted to ignore humanity's suffering. She looked at the representatives from 40 species, some friendly, some afraid, all uncertain. You offered us peace once, she said. We accepted, and you betrayed us. You watched us burn and did nothing. Now you offer us a seat at your table. You ask us to forgive. You ask us to trust again. She was quiet for a moment. We accept. Not because we have forgotten. Not because we trust you. But because we believe that the galaxy can be better. That every species can learn. That peace is possible, even after everything that has happened. She looked directly at the Velen representative. But remember, we offered peace once before. We meant it. This time, you should too. Because if this trust is broken again, there will be no third chance. There will be no mercy. There will only be silence. The gallery was completely still. On Earth, in the gardens that grew over the graves of 6 billion, a monument was built. It showed a human hand reaching toward the stars. Open. Offering. The strong. The inscription read, We extended peace. We were betrayed. We rose again. We chose mercy. May the galaxy remember what humanity is. And pray they never learn what humanity can become. The Pact had fallen. The galaxy had watched. And humanity had answered with something the stars had never seen before. Not just wrath, but wisdom. And that was the most terrifying thing of all.